The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Is WikiLeaks trying to start a Michael Hastings FBI death conspiracy? That was the headline today on the Atlantic Wire. Yesterday, we told you the incredibly sad story of the passing of Michael Hastings, a TYT guest, frequent Young Turks guest, reporter for the Rolling Stone, involved in that incredible story that led to the resignation of General Stanley McChrystal. And we talked about the circumstances of his death, which involved a car accident. WikiLeaks tweeted yesterday at 6:07 p.m., July 19th, Michael Hastings contacted WikiLeaks lawyer Jennifer Robinson just a few hours before he died, saying that the FBI was investigating him. Now, I got a bunch of emails saying, David, how dare you not mention the obvious conspiracy that was a government assassination of Michael Hastings. I probably got 10 or 15 emails along those lines. If you look at the video we did yesterday on YouTube about Michael Hastings, you'll see a bunch of comments asking those questions. And this article on the Atlantic Wire says that this seems to be, they allege, an act of desperation from WikiLeaks to become more relevant and more in the news. And they say that Jennifer Robinson, the attorney, that it is said Michael Hastings contacted just hours before his death, is an attorney who is a human rights watchdog and a protector of investigative journalists, not just a representative of Julian Assange and his legal fight. The article on the Atlantic Wire also says that WikiLeaks is simply getting desperate to stay relevant and in the news, which is also why Julian Assange said they were in touch with Edward Snowden before the release of the Edward Snowden documents, even though Glenn Greenwald has said he's not aware of any substantive WikiLeaks involvement with Snowden other than offering to help. New York Magazine says, quotes BuzzFeed editor Ben Smith as saying, yes, before his death, Michael told a number of his friends and colleagues that he was concerned that he was under investigation. Many theories starting. And I really do wonder now, this is a horrible, tragic death via what appears to be, at least as far as we now know, just a horrible car accident. Do we now have conspiracy theories about everything? Have we developed a culture now where whether it's Sandy Hook, whether it is the Boston Marathon bombing, the NSA documents, the IRS, Benghazi, I don't remember a time when everything was a conspiracy.
Neither do I. I don't know when it started. I guess it started with 9/11.
Maybe.
I guess some people say it started with JFK. But
5 years ago when we were doing the show, we weren't constantly addressing or mentioning that there were conspiracy theories about just about every news story.
Not at all.
Natan?
I think, there's always been a lot of conspiracy theories, especially in the United States. But recently, with the advent of new technologies like Twitter and Facebook and all these social media software, it's just becoming louder. So there's a minority of people that make it so loud that their message gets heard a lot more.
The IRS scandal has become even less of a scandal. Now, I've been reporting for weeks how it keeps becoming less and less of a scandal. We have now heard from a manager at the Cincinnati office in question from the IRS. This is the office that was accused of unfairly targeting conservative groups, including those with Tea Party or Patriot or 9/12 in their names. We have now heard from John Schaefer. He is the manager, a manager at the Cincinnati IRS office. And what have we found out? He told congressional investigators that he is a conservative Republican, and he was the one who flagged the first application for tax-exempt status from a Tea Party-aligned group. And that he also said he and a lower-level agent came across this back in 2010 because it was kind of like a new high-profile thing. We've got these Tea Party groups now registering here. He was asked if the lower-level agent tried to elevate the case to Washington because he disagreed with Tea Party politics, and Schaefer said absolutely not the case. He was also asked whether Washington and the Obama administration, the White House, Lewis, was involved in giving them direction to do this from above. He said, no, that is also not the case. James Sala, who's an attorney for Schaefer, said his testimony speaks for itself. It is clear that Mr. Schaefer was carrying out his job without any political motivation. Again, the case continues to become even more boring and even less scandalous. I don't know what else to say. I don't know how else to call it.
It's just part of it's part of the group of of stories that Obama's opponents will try to use to make him look bad. After this, it's going to be something else, and we're going to see one of these probably every 2 months until Obama's presidency is over with.
And again, it just makes sense to target groups who are against government, who think taxes are coercive, who believe that the tax mechanism is in and of itself wrong, than to target groups that rescue pit bull puppies. I mean, I don't know how.
Yeah, and of course those groups say that, well, perhaps this should be done anonymously, randomly. Maybe pull names out of a hat. I don't think so. That makes no sense.
I actually read a pretty good article. I believe it was on Salon.com, which says it actually didn't really end up being that valuable to target these groups because it turned out that they weren't disproportionately misusing the tax status, right? And that should actually tell us that all types of profiling doesn't make sense. I'm open to having that discussion, but what I think needs to be made clear is that there was no concerted effort here from the White House to make this happen. There was no scandal. We have a self-admitted conservative Republican who says it was my idea to do this because Tea Party groups, I mean, a lot of them are based on being against taxes. It just makes sense. It's just obvious.
It's such an absurd notion to think that the president was actively involved in this. Are you kidding me? I think he's got better things to do.
FBI Director Robert Mueller acknowledged for the first time in congressional testimony yesterday that the FBI has in fact used aerial drones for surveillance purposes within the U.S. This revelation came in the middle of more efforts from the Obama administration to justify the surveillance programs that have been, although not surprising to many, have been made public through the releases made by Edward Snowden over the last few days period of time. Now, the government did previously admit to using drones on the U.S.-Mexico border and in isolated instances, and Robert Mueller's admission is the first time that the FBI has publicly acknowledged using drones domestically. And this, some say that this may have been done to kind of preempt Edward Snowden from releasing more documents that actually publicize details about government drone usage and surveillance programs to kind of get out ahead of it, in a sense. That's certainly possible. The questioning was pretty straightforward. Chuck Grassley, a Republican senator, said, "Does the FBI own or currently use drones? And if so, for what purpose?" Mueller replied, "Yes, and for surveillance." And he went on to add, "Drones are very seldom used and generally used in a particular incident when you need the capability." He didn't say anything about what those incidents are. He kind of downplayed the significance of this, saying it's really not a big deal. There was an interesting exchange where Democratic Senator from California, Dianne Feinstein, asked, well, what privacy protections are used in deploying drones and storing the images that the drones collect? And FBI Director Mueller said their use is narrowly focused on specific incidents. It's very seldom used and generally used in a particular incident when you need the capability. He said he doesn't even know what happens to the images that the drones take. Are they stored? Are they deleted?
I find that hard to believe.
Who reviews them? Well, it's possible that he deliberately is not told, right? I mean, we know that that happens with the president, so that the president can say he doesn't know. Sometimes he is deliberately not told, but it would be weird that nobody knows what happens to the images taken with the drones. Again, we kind of knew this was going on. The issue or the surprise here isn't their use. It seems to be this broader lack of a specific policy that guides their usage that is articulated. Natan, what do you think?
Well, I just think it's important to remember that a lot of these technologies are pretty new, and as there are new telecommunications technologies that people use, intelligence gathering changes as well. And, obviously the fact that after 9/11 we passed the Patriot Act and we had a number of years where no one questioned anything related to this for fear of being branded a traitor.
Sure.
Now we're finally having the discussion about what's reasonable and what isn't given the current level of threat.
Lewis, we know that the American public doesn't have a right to know everything that is being done by the intelligence community. But that being said, do you believe that there is a right to know what is the policy on drone usage? We don't need to know every time you've used drones. We don't need to know every aspect of who has been surveilled by drones. But give us a sense of what is the policy, or is even that in your mind legitimately classified?
No, we should definitely know the policy, but we also know that the government is doing everything possible to ensure that those policies have very loose language and are very vague.
Deliberately so.
Deliberately. And they're going to do everything they can to make sure that they can continue to use drones for surveillance. I don't know if we'll ever have something that is, as articulate and detailed and concise as we want with regard to legislation on this.
There's no question you will never satisfy everyone with whatever you reveal, but the question is right now, we don't have much at all. And
Right.
just saying it's very narrow usage in specific instances, full stop, it doesn't really satisfy a lot of people.
No.
This is really, really, really funny. BuzzFeed did a story about immigration reform, okay? And in that story, the BuzzFeed article outlines how Steve King, this congressman from Iowa, who we've talked about many times, he's an immigration hardliner. He did a press conference, and it kind of turned into a rally. And it was basically it was an immigration bill protest. They don't want immigration reform moving forward. They believe that there is not, they just don't, they're anti any kind of amnesty, any kind of path to citizenship. You kind of know the drill, right?
Of course, yeah.
So, of course, it kind of is a Tea Party rally in a sense. Steve King has a lot of Tea Party support. There's different speakers. One of those speakers who supports conservative ideology, supports Tea Party ideology, this guy is on their side, ladies and gentlemen. His name is Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart. He's a Florida Republican. He spoke briefly. He got up there and he gave a little speech. And during that, he spoke some Spanish. And he starts getting heckled by the Tea Party protesters who start going over to him and yelling, "Learn English, learn English." They don't want him speaking Spanish there. Now, remember, this is a Tea Party rally. This is a guy who agrees with them. Don't you want some Hispanic members of Congress on your side to kind of make it seem like your motivations aren't just xenophobic, anti-Hispanic, and anti-immigration? Don't you remember when you realized as a party that you need the Hispanic vote because of changing demographics and you're just not going to be able to win with the white vote? You finally get a Hispanic Republican who likes what you're doing, and you start yelling at him to speak English and heckling the guy.
Let's be honest. This is not going to be a wake-up call for the racist ass who was heckling someone who was on his side.
Right.
This should be a wake-up call for Mr. Diaz-Balart.
Right,
and
that
say,
he's on the wrong side.
What am I doing here?
What am I doing over here?
Yeah.
I'm supporting this, and I'm on the wrong side. A political group, a political party, spends years trying to appeal to a bunch of people who basically hate someone. Right, a lot of the appeal for conservative, this kind of, you know the type, not all Republicans, but this kind of Tea Party-like conservative. A lot of the appeal is we are different. We want to play identity politics and dislike those who are different. It may be Hispanics. It may be Muslims, whatever the case may be. You spend years basically appealing to them. You end up getting a group of people that just basically hate each other, right? You have this Diaz-Balart guy, and he presumably wants to, there must be some group he's not particularly thrilled with, but people don't like him because of this kind of identity game that's going on there. This is not going to help Republicans appeal to Hispanics.
Not at all.
What's really funny is in the midst of this, Glenn Beck said, hey, you know what? I actually see the Tea Party as a civil rights movement. And again, in the midst of a Hispanic Tea Party or getting shouted down, I find it very, very funny what Glenn Beck had to say. Take a look at this.
This is a civil rights movement, and you may not understand it now, but believe me, you will.
Yeah.
I asked David Barton to really watch, especially the pastors behind me, because the pastors behind me, we had talked before we went on, and they weren't sure about the whole civil rights rhetoric. They had not heard my speech.
Well, now I'm sure they're very convinced. The Tea Party, a civil rights movement.
More like an anti-civil rights movement.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. Unbelievable stuff.
So in a
going
manner
on.
of speaking, he's correct.
He's correct in a sense. They certainly are addressing issues of civil rights, just in the way that was more reminiscent of those against the 1964 Civil Rights Bill.
Yeah.
On today's bonus show, excellent bonus show today. There's a bar in California which has high heel only policy for women. We're going to talk about the details. We'll talk about whether it's misogynistic or just a costume type of thing. I predict it will be interesting. We will also talk about Kim Jong-un distributing Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, to his top associates and saying, we need to learn a lot of what's in here. And a lot more stuff. Lewis hosts the bonus show. Don't miss the bonus show. Oh, also, I got flipped off on the way to work today by a motorist. Is that the right term? A fellow motorist?
Yeah.
A fellow motorist flipped me off, raising his middle finger at me. I will tell the entire story on today's bonus show. davidpakman.com/membership. Sign up. Not only do you see Lewis host, not only do you hear the story from me about the angry motorist, but you support non-corporate media, and we need that. We absolutely need that. We'll be back after this. Plenty more.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show, our membership program made possible in part by liberalbias.com. When reality doesn't live up to right-wing ideals, there is only one explanation. Reality itself suffers from liberal bias. Check out liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day is Craig Guerin. Craig, awesome stuff. Craig's a member, and he loves it. I can say that with certitude.
It's good stuff, yeah.
Thanks for being a member. Check out more about membership at davidpakman.com/membership. Huge protests in Brazil. The protests in Brazil are the largest in more than 20 years. Over 200,000 demonstrators took to the streets of a number of the biggest cities in Brazil. This all started, according to the AP, Lewis, because bus and subway fares increased by 10 cents on June 1st. That catalyzed the protests, and then that led to even bigger protests because of people's displeasure with poverty, taxes, corruption in Brazil, social services, and interestingly enough, spending on the Olympics and on the World Cup. One popular protest photo reads, "We don't need the World Cup. We need money for hospitals and education." The week's going to continue. It's not exactly clear how protesters and police are going to continue interacting. Police today were gearing up for even more protesters. But I find the World Cup and Olympics issue pretty interesting because there's this kind of conventional wisdom that bringing the World Cup or the Olympics to your city are just a great thing, period. And a lot of the times, that's not the way it works out. We talked with Dennis Campbell about this around the London Olympics quite a bit. And in the short term, in other words, a lot of the times, in the run-up and to and during the World Cup or Olympics, you do have a lot of increases in prices of real estate. You see a lot of police activity. You do also see some buildup of new facilities for the events. But afterwards, it very, very often doesn't really leave any lasting positive impact on the city and country. And people in Brazil seem to be understanding this, and it's a legitimate concern.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of money spent on defense, on security, and sometimes these cities that are inhabited, I don't know, it can be damaging.
It can.
And especially in Brazil, some of the cities where they're trying to host events are kind of unsavory.
There's cities that have significant issues in many parts.
Right. And, of course, they're making the claim that this will be a huge boost for those cities.
Right.
What happens
And it
afterwards?
often is in the short term because, I mean, look at what happened in South Africa. Was it the Summer Olympics in South Africa where you basically just pushed the locals out to make it appear as though everything's just fine here. There's no problems here. Everything's great. You bring in vendors from big corporations to sell their expensive T-shirts and jerseys. And then afterwards, everybody leaves, and you've just got a disastrous situation. It doesn't improve anything long term. We're going to continue to follow the Brazil protests. Yesterday, we did one of the most heinous stories we've ever covered, the rape and killing of a 4-month-old baby girl. The reaction to this has been significant, and I want to play a couple of voicemails we got and then talk about one of the issues that was brought up in the voicemails.
Yo, David P. Patty D. from Minneapolis. It's hard even to say the case in Missouri with the mom and the 4-month-old. Actually, it gets me emotional talking about it, but this is a type of case where I think, honestly, for the dude, castration has got to be an option. These sexual predators that continue to, or are able to do these things, it's just beyond me. And I think when it comes to sexual abuse of anybody under 10, castration or at least losing a testicle or something's got to be an option.
So Patty D, very shaken up about it, as a lot of people were, including Ralph from New York City.
Hello, David. This is Ralph from New York. I just saw the story about the 4-month-old baby that was raped and put to death by the mother's pedophile boyfriend. I'm a psychologist, and I've worked with numerous people who have been the victim of pedophilia, including their own parents. This really makes me sick. I was just wondering how you, Louis, and Natan feel about what should be done with people like this. My experience is that pedophiles are psychopaths, meaning antisocial personalities. They lack a conscience. I'm not even going to enumerate the sort of things I've heard when I worked with people like this. I was just wondering what you think should be done. I personally think that they cannot be treated effectively because of their psychopathy. And
This is a very good topic. It's a difficult topic. Personality disorders are difficult to treat, right? You give someone SSRIs, doesn't really do much for personality disorders, and many people do believe that pedophilia, to someone capable of raping and murdering a 4-month-old baby, clearly is someone who is a psychopath and who has such a fundamental disorder that it's not that they were hearing voices, they weren't schizophrenic or bipolar in the sense that something that would be tangibly treatable would really be able to be resolved in any way. So the question is, could you ever have is an individual like that always going to pose a risk?
There are certainly people out there, I'm sure, who are pedophiles, I guess, in the sense that they are attracted to children who don't act on it. I mean, that type of person has got to exist. And of course, there's a chance that they may have child pornography on their computer and things like that. It's hard for me to say that they should be locked away for life.
If they haven't committed a crime.
If they haven't actually themselves hurt a child. But I would definitely say that anyone who molests a child in any way, or especially rapes one, should definitely be put away for life.
Natan, what do you think?
I don't know. It seems like if there is a way to determine whether one of these people who have committed a crime are a continuing threat, and the current policy is to just let them go after their sentence expires, even though the parole committee pretty much knows that
there's a high recidivism
there's a pretty high
rate.
risk of doing it again.
Yeah,
I think that's a huge issue. At the same time, like Louis said, it's kind of a problem to just imprison these people for life. It seems like ideally the prison system would change where you have sort of different places for different things, and there's some way to get these people help. If there isn't help, then I don't know what to do. Maybe they should be segregated from violent criminals who might attack them. That's another issue that I was seeing yesterday in a documentary, that sex offenders are attacked horribly in prison.
Yeah,
and there's a whole other issue going on with that.
We may be straying there a little bit from Ralph, who as a psychologist said that he doesn't believe that there is a type of treatment that we have. In other words, there is not psychotherapy nor medication that would resolve a personality disorder such that someone without hearing voices, without any traditional mental illness of that kind would say, I think I'm going to rape a 4-month-old, that it's not the type of thing that we have treatment for.
I don't think it can be treated either. I think that's why if they attempt to molest or rape a child or do it, they have to be put away for life.
All right, let's send me your thoughts on this. I think that there's going to be a lot of reaction to it. You know Paula Deen from the Food Network? She's the one who does the cooking shows, and she has cooking shows with her family, so on and so forth. The first time I came across Paula Deen, I did something which I really try not to do, which is I made an assumption about her. And my assumption was that I felt like there was something about the way she was interacting with the other people on her program. Sometimes she has her children on her show. Sometimes she tells stories about her family. Something about her struck me as, and I don't like admitting that sometimes I jump to these conclusions. She feels like there's something racist or xenophobic about Paula Deen. And I said, oh, you know what? It's wrong of me to assume that just because she has a Southern accent, that those are beliefs she holds. That is the type of stereotype I'm trying to separate myself from. And I think I successfully did. And I said, that's a stupid thing to assume. And it's wrong of me. And I need to, this was, 6, 7 years ago. And I need to be more conscious of the way that I'm reacting to certain types of people. And we now know that Paula Deen is incredibly racist. We now have a lawsuit that is being filed. This is kind of a long story. Last month, she gave a videotaped deposition as part of a discrimination suit that she's facing, where she discussed her desire to have a, quote, very Southern-style wedding for her brother, which was modeled after a restaurant where the whole wait staff was middle-aged black men wearing white jackets and black bow ties, according to a transcript. She admitted to using the N-word. She discussed ways in which the N-word can be said in something that's not a mean way. And then there's a bunch of these allegations also revolving around her brother, Earl Bubba Hears, and also Paula Deen's company. And they operate a couple of restaurants down in Savannah, Georgia, and they're being sued by a former employee, Lisa Jackson. And the complaint says that she was subjected to violent, sexist, and racist behavior when she was working at a number of Paula Deen's different businesses. And the allegations are pretty broad, including that at Uncle Bubba's Oyster House, Jackson claims that black employees were required to use separate bathrooms and entrances from white staffers. Again, these are allegations that are part of the suit. Jackson also said that African Americans were held to different, more stringent standards than the white employees, and that Paula Deen's brother regularly made offensive racial remarks. And along with these allegations of racism, Lewis, Jackson's complaint accuses Paula Deen's brother of making inappropriate sexual comments, forcing her to look at porn with him. And then we get to, Paula Deen and her views. And the complaint actually details an incident where Lisa Jackson was in charge of food and serving arrangements at the wedding of Paula Deen's brother back in 2007. And the complaint includes a comment that Paula Deen herself allegedly made when asked by Jackson, what types of uniforms should the servers wear at the wedding? And Paula Deen said, well, what I would really like is a bunch of little N-words to wear long-sleeve white shirts, black shorts, and black bow ties. That would be a true Southern wedding, wouldn't it? Paula Deen admits that she used a lot of these phrases, including a really Southern plantation wedding. She denies using the N-word in that particular quote, but she says, yeah, I use the N-word when talking about, I've used the N-word and it's just not always offensive. What do you think?
I think it looks pretty clear. but at the same time, I mean, if you are, I mean, okay, maybe she gets this power trip on having black people as servants and waiters, but
and calling them the N-word.
But at the same time, they are employees and they're being paid by her. So I mean, if it's strange,
you're saying if she was really racist, she wouldn't hire black people to begin with?
Like, it doesn't seem like she's repulsed by black people, but at the same time, it kind of does. It's weird.
Natan, what do you think? Lewis saying that she's willing to be served food by black people. So how racist could she really be?
Go see Inglourious Bastards. I mean, honestly, paternalistic slaveholding was pretty common, and they were perfectly racist. They just thought that they could treat them well. They're inferior, but we can treat them well. So I reject that argument.
That may be the mentality.
The Food Network says that they do not tolerate any form of discrimination, and they are strong proponents of diversity and inclusion. They are
sorry, not Inglourious Bastards. Django Unchained is what I meant.
Django Unchained. Yeah. Wrong Tarantino movie.
Right.
Food Network will continue to monitor the situation. A lot of people saying, where's Food Network on this?
I mean, if that's true, aren't they going to fire her?
You would think so.
Yeah.
We will continue to follow it. DavidPakman.com/gear. Get your David Pakman Show t-shirts, hoodies, and what else? Zip-ups. We got a lot of stuff on there, all made from recycled materials. Take a break. Next, Ahmadinejad out in Iran. We'll talk about it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Joining us today is Dennis Campbell. He is editor-in-chief of UK Progressive Magazine. Also, check out Worldview on YouTube at youtube.com/worldviewshow. And also BookView on YouTube, youtube.com/bookviewtv. So, Dennis, the big news was Mahmoud Ahmadinejad no longer in power in Iran. It sounds like good news, but it sounds like there's really a lot more to know as well. So what's the situation?
Well, we're still in a transition government at the moment. Ahmadinejad, believe it or not, is still the president for another month or so. But they've elected Dr. Rouhani as the incoming president. And it's been rather amusing to watch the Western media fall over itself, almost like having some catnip here. We're so desperate for moderate leadership in Iran that people are rushing to say that, this is a moderate leader, just as they've done the last 2 or 3 times before Ahmadinejad. And each time they've been disappointed. The book on Rouhani is that, he was the one back as early as 2006 that was mocking the West for, its belief that anything was going to change, and also was in charge of making sure that the nuclear program went forward, and he's been a member of Khamenei's inner circle for quite some time. So to label this guy a moderate is ridiculous, and to label these elections legitimate is also ridiculous. Every one of the candidates were handpicked by the Ayatollah's supreme leadership there, council, and they all are handpicked, and this guy just happens to be a bit more moderate, but he's been in that inner circle for decades.
Yeah, so let's talk about the kind of range of allegations against about the lack of legitimacy to the election. When people think about a sham election, they probably think of it on the voting side. But was that an element, or was it just in terms of who the candidates were?
Well, the claim was that 72% of the Iranian people came out to vote. Not part one, and of those 72%, 50% of them, so we're talking roughly 35% of the Iranian population voted for this man. The problem was that all of the opposition candidates were left off the ballot altogether. There was a complete shutdown on the use of social media, the use of any media that talked about any of the exiled candidates, and the election itself was quickly decided, as it was before. I mean, when Ahmadinejad won 4 years ago, his re-election, it was decided before polls were even closed that he had won with 72% of the vote. So this is the way in which they handle elections there in Iran, and it's no surprise to anybody.
So talk a little bit about, we hear very often kind of in broad strokes that the population of Iran is both quite young demographically, but also very, very moderate. Do we even know what the reaction is internally from these young moderates, or is that part of the problem, which is that it's very difficult to really hear what the opinion is?
Well, that is part of the problem, because you don't know what messages are being allowed to filter out. Iran's secret police is very, very strong, and they crack down on dissidents. I've been covering for the last 5 years a story about a group of refugees that have been living in Iraq across the border, about 60 miles away from the location of 60 miles from Baghdad and 60 miles from the Iranian border. And they've been under ongoing attacks, even during the election weekend just passed. They used to live in a place called Camp Ashraf. Now they live in a place called Camp Liberty, which used to be the U.S. Armed Forces base there. And they're literally sitting ducks sitting there in these very fragile trailers. And 40 rockets were launched at them Saturday morning during the election to try and divert attention away from what was going on inside the country. This is very classic. This is a play right out of the Iranian government's playbook. And indeed, not tomorrow, but Saturday, there will be a gathering of Iranian exiles from around the globe in Paris itself. And there are probably 24 or so very, very top American politicians from both parties, including people like Patrick Kennedy and Newt Gingrich. And I can't imagine Patrick and Newt being on the same dais. But, the fact is that when you look at these refugees, they've been completely abandoned in our in the U.S.'s attempt to get out of Iraq.
This may be a very long answer, maybe a topic for its own segment, but speaking briefly about this, what's your sense of the effect in Iran of the number of uprisings that we've seen in that part of the world over the last several years? In other words, today and going forward, and maybe in connection with this latest so-called election, do we have any sense that the broader climate in the Middle East will affect the future of Iran?
I think the better way to look at that question, David, is to rephrase it. Will the broader future of Iran affect the rest of the world? I mean, they have been notoriously interventionist bad actors throughout the region. And you can literally look at every one of their neighbors from Iraq, where they have a very fragile relationship between Hezbollah, the Sunni versus the Shia fight there is very strong. And if you look at what's happening on a global political level, the civil wars that are about to break out in this so-called regional conflict are going to be between Sunni and Shia Muslims, full stop. If you look at what Iran has done, they've crossed the border into Syria. They've become very involved there and very entrenched. They're threatening the regime in Jordan. King Abdullah, is hanging on by in his fingernails. If you look to the south, to Lebanon and to the border with Israel, they're consistently bad actors in that particular area. Their threats to have nuclear weapons. All of this is part of an ongoing pattern. So the question becomes, will this young demographic be in a position at some point in time to stand up? I'm not certain. Their secret police is very well entrenched. Their military is very, very strong. And it's somebody you don't necessarily want to pick a fight with unless you're certain you're going to win.
All right, Dennis Campbell, make sure to check out Worldview Show on YouTube, youtube.com/Worldview Show, as well as Bookview TV, youtube.com/Bookview TV, which will be featuring the Fox News mole, Joe Muto, in the next few days. And we'll be having him on the show next week. So a lot to look forward to. Excellent stuff, Dennis. Thank you.
Thank you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Thanks for being with us today on this Thursday. Make sure to check out the I Love It When I Wake Up in the Morning and Barack Obama is President Facebook page, and also the Too Informed to Vote Republican page. People who like those pages both joining us today on the YouTube live stream.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about Ray Kurzweil before. He's a futurist. He is Google's director of engineering. He's also a really, really quirky guy, and he had a couple of comments that he made recently about the future. He believes we will be uploading our entire minds by 2045, and that our human bodies will be replaced by machines within about 90 years. Here is video of Ray Kurzweil talking a little bit about the future.
We're going to become increasingly non-biological to the point where the non-biological part predominates and the biological part is not that important anymore. In fact, the non-biological part, the machine part, will be so powerful it can completely model and understand the biological part. So even if that biological part went away, it wouldn't make any difference because the non-biological part already understood it completely.
All right. So this is there's so many things we could talk about with this, but there's so, I don't even know where to start. I mean, question one is this idea of transferring one's mind or consciousness onto a hard drive and then potentially into another physical body or even just into an existence that is only digital, so to speak. Is that really the continuation of your consciousness, or are you really dying and then you're creating a new entity which has the same memories that you did at the point that your consciousness was uploaded, but is really a different entity? In other words, if I transfer my consciousness at this point right now into another body, that's not really me. It's just someone who has all of my memories and starts living a new life with those memories.
Well, I mean, consciously, it would still be you, right? But if what we're talking about are machines that can just store this data, then is it really a consciousness? I mean, if we're talking about being able to upload everything that's in here into a machine and continuing to use everything that's up here as if it were still a brain and communicate, well, guess it would just be your consciousness. You just might feel kind of strange. You won't have a body anymore.
Some people, Natan, think that it would be wrong for humans to live, to have human consciousness disconnected from a physical presence in the world. A lot of people, on the other hand, though, think that kind of more advanced thinking species will, or if they already exist, they don't necessarily have physical bodies. What's your thought on that?
Well, even if you don't consider the possibility of like uploading a mind onto a computer, if you just think about, having synthetic cells grow in the brain to the point where, you have a few to replace, old aging neurons, and then after a few more years, they sort of become the majority, and then eventually they're 100%. You'll still have all your memories. It'll be your brain, but the cells, instead of being biological cells, they'll be synthetic cells that are potentially immortal. At that point, I think it's hard to say, given that you grow new brain cells all the time, that it's not you. It's just not the same type of cell that it was before, whereas uploading your brain does create that question about what happens to the original brain. So I don't know how to answer the question, but I think we can definitely see synthetic versions of our bodies taking hold.
Anything else you want to add, Louis? This kind of connects to that old Philosophy 101 question of, if we had teleportation and you were to be removed, if every cell was to be removed here and recreated through a teleporter across the world, is that really still you? Or is it just a replacement of you with the exact same memories, which begins living where it teleports to? It's a similar type of question, right?
Yeah, I don't know if we can get into that, but
No.
I am fascinated by this, and I have to admit, if I had to choose between dying and not uploading my brain and dying and uploading my brain, I think I would upload my brain.
You would?
Yeah.
I think I would too.
Why not?
What the hell?
Yeah.
I love uploads. Mm-hmm. All right, let's go to voicemail.
As long as the upload speed is quick.
Yeah, I don't want to be dealing with dial-up.
Yeah.
Our voicemail line is open 24 hours a day. The phone number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a voicemail about Marco Rubio and Miss Utah and her Miss USA gaffe earlier this week.
Hey guys, this is Danny from Tampa, Florida. Great show Monday. A comment about our senator here in Florida, Marco Rubio. It's no secret I really do despise this guy for many reasons. I call him the Latin Uncle Tom because that's what he is.
That's a good one.
I really do hope that we can vote him out sooner than later.
Yeah.
Because he is a dangerous man for politics. On the other hand, your comments about the Miss USA, I can't stand Donald Trump, but I have to thank him because of him. We see how stupidity is rampant across America, and like you said, she won third place. It's a really sad story.
Yeah, Miss Utah, her answer still being good enough for third place. And a voicemail about the Republicans who want to ban abortion because fetuses masturbate in utero. Didn't make any sense then, still doesn't. Here's a voicemail about it.
So, if the religious right is saying a baby masturbates while it's in its mother's fetus.
Okay, let's start right there. I think he meant in his mother's womb. It is a fetus in its mother's womb. But we'll continue.
It should be a perfectly natural act. So when the baby comes out and becomes a young man and they catch him masturbating in his bedroom, they tell him he's a sinner and they give him all kinds of grief over it and tell him he's a bad person when you're doing it when you're a baby.
Right.
That just shows you what kind of hypocrite these people really are.
Yeah, it doesn't really make much sense. I think we kind of alluded to that point that's being made much more eloquently there. Yeah, a lot of hypocrisy there. A lot of hypocrisy in the fetal masturbation concept.
I would say so.
The Indiegogo campaign continues. We are trying to pass $7,000. Please visit our website, davidpakman.com. This bright blue banner at the top right of the page takes you to the Indiegogo campaign. Take a stake. Take a stake in the David Pakman Show. If it's $1, if it's $10, if it's $100, if it's $1,000, it doesn't really matter. It's about getting buy-in from the biggest number of contributors possible. I get emails from people saying, I was thinking of donating $10, but I wish I could donate more. I don't know if I'm going to donate. Donate the $10. That $10 and that additional contributor, who knows how many people will see the number of contributors increasing and decide to contribute themselves. Check it out. And you can also become a David Pakman Show member, davidpakman.com/membership. That is it for today. We'll be back Monday afternoon, 2 p.m. Eastern. See you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.